Okay. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to episode 3 of Empowered, hosted by Cancer Warrior Canada Foundation. If you don't know me yet, my name is Rebecca Durrance-Hine. I am a cancer thriver, founder of Arenda Cancer Community and blog, and now your co-host of Empowered for the evening. I would just want to, before we get started, remind everybody to post any questions that you might have or comments down in the comments section underneath the live stream. Again, just like the last 2 episodes, we'll have maybe half an hour, 35 minutes of discussion, and then we'll have 10 or 15 minutes of questions at the end. So we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. So I'd like to welcome our guest for this evening, Dr. Lori Bouchard. Dr. Lori is a licensed naturopathic doctor and an author. She completed her doctorate in naturopathic medicine at the prestigious Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine in Toronto. She's the author of Live Longer and Stronger with Breast Cancer, a step-by-step guide to help women fight their cancer more effectively. And she's the owner of Oakville's most innovative naturopathic healing center, Inside Health Clinic, which has been helping men and women reverse complicated diseases like Lyme, chronic fatigue, and of course, cancer for over a decade. She's also a member of the Oncology Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And on a personal note, I am very honored to have her as a part of my healing team. Dr. Lori has been my naturopath since the beginning of my journey. And I absolutely just adore her work and her clinic and everyone there. She's amazing. Hi, Dr. Lori. Thank you for being here
Hi,
tonight.
that was a great intro. Thank you so much for having me. This is going
Of
to be fun.
course. So
Good.
why don't we get started with just a little bit of background information about yourself, and then how you came to focus maybe on cancer specifically in your practice.
Sure. So I graduated from naturopathic medicine about 10 years ago, and I never in a million years thought I would focus in on cancer. The whole field just seemed very overwhelming, very intimidating. I actually thought I was going to focus in on fertility, something just talking about hormones and maybe gut health. But really, when it comes to cancer, it's everything tied together. And when you stop focusing just on the cancer and the tumor itself and start focusing on the person and saying, what else can we do to make your immune system strong, your hormones balanced? I realized that it's all the pieces tied together. It was really my first patient about 8 to 10 years ago. And I think you met David in the clinic.
I did.
He was the very first cancer patient that came to me, and he was wheelchair bound. He was given a month to live, like really just really bad odds,
Yeah.
right? He was sent home in palliative. The family was told, okay, pack up his affairs, like he's done, right? And so when he came in to see me, I was, how old was I at the time? 25 years old, and they was fresh out of school.
Wow.
And saying, okay, you're our last resort. Chemo won't work anymore. Radiation, nothing is going to work. So we're coming to you now. Like, what else can we do? So that's a lot of pressure there.
Yeah.
And so when I kind of like stepped out of the box and said, okay, let's not, because clearly the chemo, radiation, all of that focusing on the cancer is not working. So we had to take a different approach, and let's test his heavy metals. Let's look at his nutrient status. Let's look at his immune system, his hemoglobin. We looked at the whole picture, and he ended up living 8 years longer than the diagnosis gave him. So that really sparked my interest in thinking how I can help people in that same situation when they feel very stuck and they feel like the end of the rope. And that
Right.
is, I'm sure you know too, a big flaw in the conventional field.
Absolutely.
It's as amazing as it is, it's really, you need both that integrative model, or else it's just such a toxic and overwhelming field. So for me, I'm still learning every single day, but it's such an exciting, like always new research coming out, and always such investigation for every single, so unique.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, so cancer really just took over in the way that I practice.
Yeah.
And I'm always,
It kind of found you.
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, get to meet amazing people like you.
Yeah. I always think of the definition of insanity in relation to cancer as doing the same thing twice and expecting different results. So if we don't look at those root issues, the root causes why we got cancer in the first place, and we don't change anything, then it's like, we're kind of continuing on doing the same thing that we've always done and hoping for a different result. So yeah, I think that I totally agree that it's so important to look at all of those root causes and how you got here in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah, so talking about root causes,
Hmm.
um there's a few that I want to talk about tonight. So let's start with hormones, because I think it's a really big part of a lot of, especially breast cancer, which is one of the most common types. So how do hormone imbalances affect the development of cancer?
So we know that there's several cancers that are hormone driven. So
Mhm.
breast cancer being one, endometrial, uterine, and prostate cancer. So basically, we have hundreds of receptors on every one of our cells, and so if we know that there's these cancers that are fed by estrogen, for example, then we have to look at everything around us that's in our life that is feeding those estrogen
Mhm.
receptors. And genetically, some of us are just better at breaking down what are called xenoestrogens and the different types of estrogen metabolites than others. So some of us do a really good job of doing that, but even for you at a young age, why was your system not able to break it down, whereas
Right.
some people can be doing the exact same things and their hormones are able to regulate more effectively. So
Totally. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
big part of it. And I think often too, as females, we don't necessarily we think things are so common and it's normal. So, for example, getting cramps before your period, or breast tenderness, or feeling totally agitated and irritable before we get our periods. Most women think that's just a normal
Right.
process, but we don't realize, okay, that is not normal, and there are things that you can do to balance that and regulate your hormones. So
Definitely. Which makes total sense because, for example, like birth control pill, the reason why it helps with things like mood swings and cramps and things like that is because it's affecting your hormone levels. So it makes total sense that we get those like PMS symptoms when something is off. So that's really interesting.
exactly.
So yeah. So how can, because I know, like, the conventional treatments are very harsh and they can affect our bodies on in so many different ways. And I know that hormones are one of those ways that chemo can affect us. So how do we balance our hormones after chemo or after radiation or anything else that's kind of disrupted them?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because most of the time you have a hormone imbalance to start off with, which is
Right.
why the cancer is being fed in the first place. And then you throw in like a bomb into the system of all the chemo and radiation, and just a really like,
Yeah.
it's like a huge fire and an inflammation going on in the body.
Totally.
Now, going after that, you think my liver is not working as effectively as it was a few months ago. Your kidneys, your lymphatic system, everything is just a little bit more stagnant.
Right.
So balancing hormones, that's where I have a step-by-step process, which I talk about in my book, but also in clinic. You have to start with the gut. You have to look at how is your gut eliminating, because if your microbiome isn't set up properly, you're just going to recycle these hormones through your system and create more of an estrogen dominant picture. So to
Right.
answer your question, how to balance hormones, looking at gut health for one. I love hormone testing. So that's really the one way that you know where exactly your hormones are. So,
Right.
for example, you have three different estrogen metabolites. You have 2-OH, which is the most protective, 4-OH, and 16-OH. If the 4 and 16 are elevated, then that's going to increase your risk for all types of cancers
Mm,
across the board, and even hormonal imbalances. So testing is really critical, I would say, for everyone,
mhm.
just to know exactly where they stand. And then we can go from there, setting up a treatment plan to see what can we do to balance that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know that for me, doing the hormone testing was really key because what we discovered is that was not metabolizing my 4-estrogen very well. And then because I was also on the birth control pill, I was just giving, so my body couldn't even process its natural estrogen. And then I was just giving it more every single month. And I was on the pill for like 10 years. So it was a really long time. So I remember you saying that, like, that's really telling and so interesting, because my breast cancer was hormonal. So it was
Yeah.
really interesting to get that like snapshot sort of inside of my body, because it is like you said, when someone's as young, for those who don't know, I was 28 when I was diagnosed. So for someone so young, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink that much. My diet was not terrible. So yeah, it was really a really, really interesting piece of the puzzle, because the whole time I was kind of like, how did this happen?
Right.
So, yeah.
The person where you'd say this makes no sense
Yeah.
because why? Because your age, right? And you weren't I'm sure you weren't a horrible eater before. And a
Mhm.
lot of people, I'd say almost everyone that comes into the clinic who has cancer, they say it makes no sense to me at all. I've always
Right.
eaten well, I've done all these things, but when you really start to pick apart and then looking at how your body is responding to that,
Right.
then it starts to make sense. I mean, the
Mhm.
cancer rate, or 1 out of every 2 people in their lifetime will have
Isn't that
cancer. So
crazy?
hormones are just kind of like one piece of that
Puzzle.
puzzle.
Hmm. So talking about diet, and gut health too, how does poor diet also contribute to the development of cancer?
So if you look at cancer is really only 5 to 10% genetic. So just say you have this genetic predisposition. There's the whole field of epigenetics,
Hmm.
which is basically telling us how nutrition can turn those genes on or off. So we
Mm.
have so much power in the food that we're putting in our body and how it's regulating our genetic predisposition. But then also all these foods, they also have what's called phytochemicals. So there's hundreds of compounds that we can put into our body every single day. And the studies show that decrease your chances for cancer if you're having more, for example, cruciferous vegetables with every meal,
Right.
or if you're increasing the orange and the orange vegetables, so like the more root vegetables.
Right.
So things that you can put into your system not only have tons of vitamins and minerals, but are super important for the fiber and soluble fiber. They feed your microbiome in the gut, which is most of where your immune system is. So it's
Yep.
really all connected, right? Just the
It
power
is.
of what you're feeding your system. And it makes sense. Like
Mhm.
think of if you're giving your plant really dead fertilizer, like the soil is just no nutrients in it. The
Yep.
plant is not going to thrive. Or if
No,
it's dehydrated, it's just going to kind of wilt over. So you look at it just makes sense, right? And so to
definitely.
not realize, okay, everything we're putting in our body makes such a big impact and we actually
Mhm.
have power over it. It's pretty amazing.
It is. So what are some of the just going on diet a little bit, what are some of the main things that people should maybe avoid when they are either healing or wanting to prevent cancer in the first place?
Um, so I this even is more important now, I feel like, than ever. So having a diagnosis of cancer, I'm sure, is just your whole world is thrown out of proportion, right? Like it's just a
Mhm.
big stressful time of what to do now. But then even what's going on in the world, like you just turn on the news, there's just stress everywhere. And so
Mhm.
there's certain things that you can put in your body that would actually trigger what are called catecholamines. So it increases those stress hormones. So not
Mm.
only mentally thinking about stress, but there's things like coffee, chocolate, any kind of caffeine, alcohol, all of those things.
All the good stuff.
All the things that people, yeah, exactly. The stuff you would typically think of as getting through stress. So,
Right.
really stressed, they tend to be more tired and they have more coffee,
Right.
but really that's like pumping out those hormones even more, which is exacerbating the whole situation.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question of what things you should be avoiding are probably all the things that you would crave, all the things that you crave at this moment. Yeah, so even things like citrus fruits would trigger catecholamine, like
Mm.
cortisol and
Oh, I didn't know that.
that hormone. Yeah, and even bananas too. So
Oh.
yeah. But for foods that you want to increase would be all the ones
Mhm.
that really fuel your gut. So with bananas, when it's very ripe, that like more on the browner side, then it's full of sugars. But if
Right.
you want your gut, you can actually have it when it's more green and that
Ah,
has more prebiotics in it to feed your gut microbiome.
nice. Yeah, so just for people who don't know, when you say microbiome, gut microbiome, what are you referring to?
So we have billions of bacteria that make up our gut. So it's kind of like the environment in our intestinal tract. And that's basically how our food is digested. Hormones are activated, even vitamins are being activated there. It's the main, basically, it's like our second brain, right? So even when we think of like anxiety and depression, we have 80% of serotonin and dopamine produced in our microbiome, like in the gut. And we have what's called enteric nervous system that even just like the way you think is going to affect gut health and vice versa, right? And so we know that if we're anxious, a lot of people may get diarrhea or have other intestinal issues because of that nervous system that's connected.
Wow. And you mentioned too that because this was something that was totally like I had no idea when I first started out on this journey that so much of our immune system is in our gut. So what that might be a kind of a confusing or new idea for people. So what how is that so that so much of our immune system is housed in our gut?
Yeah. So I actually learned this concept when I was 12, and when I had an earache, my mother sent me in to go get a colonic. Like when you're that young, you're thinking, Mom, what on earth are you think? Like my issue is up here. And that's the same with cancer, right? It's like if you have an issue in one part of the body, you would think, okay, let's just target in on that part of the body.
Right.
But we know that you have to take a whole systemic approach and look at the whole system and how that is feeding the other part of the body. So when looking at just the you have specific type of like lymphatic tissues in the gut and throughout the whole body. So if you think we have lymph nodes all in our neck, lymph in our gut, lymph in our groin, in the axilla, under the armpits, our whole system is constantly trying to fight for us. So if you even notice like inflamed nodes in the neck that just won't go away, those are things that we need to improve your lymphatic system and how your immune system is fighting for you. So the gut is like literally 80% of how your immune functions. So it only makes sense that the foods that you're putting in there and how you're treating your gut is going to give you the best fighting chance towards cancer.
Totally. So you mentioned a few of those foods, like root vegetables, those orange vegetables, the ones that are really high in prebiotic fiber. Are there other foods that we can eat that are really good for our immunity, really good for our energy?
Yeah. So the ones that we would think of are really important for energy. You think of like sugars, right? Like people think, okay, I want the quick, like carbs, what's going to give me that get up and go. But what that does actually is it's a really vicious cycle where it's like the more carbs you have, the more you're going to be dependent on that. So the best way to sustain energy and have a strong immune system is to fuel your body with proteins and fats. So keeping carbs on the lowest side and then more proteins. And so that would include like avocado, olive oil, so unheated or raw olive oil, all the nuts and seeds, all of anything that like fish would be important too. So things that have higher protein and fats are what you'd want to make predominantly in your diet.
Right. Awesome. Just want to give people a reminder at this point to make sure you're putting your comments and your questions at the bottom, and we'll get to as many of them as we can in just a few minutes. So can you talk a bit about, because we've been talking about diet, and when people hear the word metabolism, they often think, like your body burning calories. So how does metabolism actually like relate to cancer? Because I know for me, I'd only ever heard metabolism talked about in the context of losing weight, or like my metabolism sucks, so I gain weight. So how does metabolism fit in with cancer? How do they relate?
Okay, so about 100 years ago, there was a Nobel Prize winner named Otto Warburg, and he discovered that there was actually a whole metabolic effect to cancer cells. And so cancer cells actually have an entirely different metabolism than our healthy cells. So when you think of energy production and how our body produces this energy, cancer cells are not effective at all. So for example, if I had one piece of just say sugar from fruit, typically in healthy cells, we can make 36 I don't want to get too too technical here, but basically make 19 times more energy ATP molecules versus cancer cells where you have one sugar molecule, you only produce two. energy
Right.
production. So it just shows the whole metabolic effect. And even cancer cells produce more lactic acid. So just
Mm.
the tumor itself is a very acidic environment. So if we know that this is more of a metabolic condition with cancer, then we can do things to intervene to actually feed the mitochondria and support your healthy cells from preventing them to go turning into cancer cells.
Ah, I see. So it's the
Is
two
that way?
types. Yeah, so it's the sort of the cancer cells are metabolizing uh, energy, sugar, essentially differently than our healthy cells. So if we can maintain a healthy metabolism, we are less likely to develop cancer cells. Is that right?
Exactly. But
Okay.
yeah, like diet is it, but you think of like toxicity, how that affects the mitochondria and the metabolic
Hmm.
effect, right?
Right.
So toxicity, stress, radiation. So even a lot of conventional treatments do damage the metabolism of these cells and can
Hmm.
turn them into cancer cells.
Right.
So we are looking at two different energy productions, like healthy cells, what they do, and then how abnormal cells produce energy. And they're just horrible energy producers. So
Yeah.
that's why people tend to crave and crave more carbs when they have cancer, because it's like, give me all the fuel that I
Right.
can get just so I can eat eyes.
Right. Makes sense. So what are some of the ways then that people can support a healthy metabolism in their cells?
So getting rid of, so looking at toxicity is the
Hmm.
one. So I like to test everyone just to see what kind of triggers or what's in their system. So for example, if you have high mercury or high lead in the
Mm.
body, then that's going to affect the metabolic
Wow.
rate of. So even if you're not a smoker, even if you don't have work environment being around pollution, you can still get these heavy metals passed down from your mother or
Right.
even 4 generations back. So we're
Wow.
born in a very environment.
Hmm.
So looking out for things around you, right? So even getting filters in your on your shower and
Yeah.
drinking water that has been filtered as well. Getting rid of the immediate contaminants or
Hmm.
looking for dental amalgams. Like if you have mercury in your mouth,
Hmm.
then that's a constant source of getting metals into the bloodstream and disrupting how your immune system is being regulated.
Definitely. Definitely. So interesting. You mentioned stress, and we were talking about metabolism. And we, as you mentioned before too, we are living, it seems like, with more stress than ever, especially in the last couple of months. It's just sort of been like one thing after another. So, how does stress affect cancer or the development of it, and what can we do to combat it?
Yeah, so I think we all know that we just live in a very busy, crazy world, and it's so
Hmm.
easy to say, "Oh, just don't take on so much."
Right.
Right? I know for yourself and even for myself, it's like you get so excited about so many that you just want more, but really learning to step back. And like, how often do you just kind of sit down and breathe and do
Right.
nothing? Right? Like, a lot of us think that's, oh, that's being lazy if I do that, or I have to be productive all the time. So, mentally shifting where we're at, because just the act of like sitting and writing for 15 minutes a day, that's been shown to improve lymphocytes and natural killer cells and how our immune system functions. So I highly encourage, and I have to listen to this advice for myself
Yeah.
as well, but to have 15 minutes in a day where you do nothing, just literally nothing. And the people that say, oh, I can't meditate, I can't do, I just physically can't do it, you're likely the person that really needs to.
Needs it. Yeah, definitely. Um, and you mentioned, yeah, like meditating, and these are things that we can do at home. Are there other things that people can do to because a lot of us are stuck at home a lot more than usual right now. Are there other things that we can be doing to boost our immunity, boost our healing while we're stuck at home?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So as you know, I'm a huge fan of testing too. So if you know you can't get out of certain situations,
Hmm.
like you have a lot of stuff going on at home or at work, whatever the case is, you want to see how is your body producing cortisol and how is it being metabolized. So for a lot of people, they don't metabolize it well. And so these hormones are continually being circulated in their system. So one thing that's really good for how your body breaks up stress and deals with cortisol is intermittent fasting. So that's something that everyone can apply. And even when it comes to for survival rates, it's actually increased if you even add in a 12-hour fast per night. So that's really stopping eating at 7 p.m. and nothing before 7 a.m.
Yeah.
So intermittent fasting can help with how your body deals with sugars, how it deals with cortisol. The stress hormone will be reduced. It's giving your body almost a break, right? And then if you can go longer into like a 16-hour fast and only eat within an 8-hour window, that's even better. So you do want to kind of like transition into that, but giving your body a break in general, like if you think you're in this always like a sympathetic mode, like go, go, go all the time, and then you're trying to feed yourself and think you have all this energy to digest, it's just happen. You have to be in a really relaxed, calm state, like appreciating your food, like chewing 20 times before you swallow. Like there's so many important steps that we just miss when we're eating all the time. So just something simple of removing food for a period, that alone is so powerful.
That's so interesting. I do intermittent fasting, so and I have for quite a while. And so for anyone out there who's thinking like, oh my gosh, I could never fast, I get hangry, or I get anxious when I don't eat, or it's just good to eat. You should be eating all the time. It actually is so nice to give yourself a break from planning what you're going to eat and thinking about what you're going to eat and making time for eating, which is important, but it is actually really nice to give yourself that break. My morning routine is so much easier because I just wait to eat until a little bit later. So it's really, really doable. Yeah. It actually simplifies.
What's that?
It actually, for me, has simplified my mornings. Yeah.
Right. It takes the stress off of what you're gonna make first thing.
Exactly.
But then I want to clarify too. A lot of people think that they're intermittent fasting because their first meal, let's say, is 11 o'clock, but then they'll have a coffee with creamer in it,
right?
So that breaks the fast too. So for people to be aware of literally nothing unless it's water. Some people can tolerate black coffee and some people can tolerate green tea. Some people can tolerate lemon, but that's an individual thing. So just to be safe, it's really like nothing until then.
All right. So this is switching gears a little bit, but I know for me, like walking that balance of, because I took a really integrative approach, as you know, there was a very delicate balance between walking the conventional world and the alternative world, and sometimes that was really difficult. And I know like many conventional oncologists are going to tell you only stick to mainstream medicine when it comes to cancer care, because that's all they know about, that's all they're trained to talk about. So I know what my thoughts on that are, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on combining the two, conventional and alternative.
Yeah, I just think it's such a shame. I think it's such a shame that it's so divided. And when you can't see the benefits of both worlds, like to say, no, your hormones, let's just let's give everyone the same protocol. You have this type of cancer. Let's follow this algorithm. And no matter what your genetics say, what your hormones say, like to really have that same approach is what conventional medicine is. It needs to be more personalized. That's just the bottom line. And even when you're looking at blood work too, so we have these like crazy reference ranges where the gap is so wide. So even if you're within that reference range, you're quote normal. But then people say like, oh, but my hair is falling out and I have all this acne and I'm so tired. But oh no, but you're within a normal range. So it's normal. So that's where naturopathic medicine really differs from conventional in the sense of we have the time to really investigate and personalize the approach. And I think a lot of times too, oncologists say stop everything else just to be safe, right? They're really sure, but they don't realize that there are so many studies showing how it can actually make what they're doing more effective. for example, even like fasting 24 hours before their chemo session will improve efficacy of 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So that alone, like, why would we not want to integrate those models? And
Totally.
even now the studies are coming out more and more. So it's, I don't think anyone's going to put billions of dollars into studying like vitamin C. They're just not going to do it. So I think they're waiting for those studies to come out, but we just know how the body works and just what makes sense. So, and
Yeah.
so that integrative. So anyone that says, "Oh, my oncologist says I can only do this," I feel really bad. Like, you can't just do the drugs and eat a crappy diet and not follow the other 90% of the things you do, because the cancer will come back.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like what we were saying at the very top of the show, that if you don't look at those, if you don't do anything to address the root causes of why you got it in the first place, if you don't go looking for what those root causes could be, and you don't start implementing some things to change what led to cancer in the first place, yeah, there's a likelihood that it could come back. And we have really huge recurrence rates, more, way higher than I'm sure anyone would like to see. Yeah, and I agree. It's such a shame. I've always thought that, because there's biases on both sides. Like, the alternative world can even be quite biased against the conventional world too. Like, there are some people who are completely against using any conventional tools whatsoever, and then the same thing, there's lots of people from the conventional world who are very, will say you shouldn't do anything from the alternative world. And yeah, I always thought it was such a shame, because why not use every single tool that you have available to you? Like, there's some really fantastic drugs out there. I did Herceptin, and I'm sure it made a massive difference, and I'm on tamoxifen now, but there's so many things from the alternative world that I'm doing as well. And it makes me feel, just for people who are wondering or curious or worried about doing it, honestly, it has helped with my mental health so much as well, doing all of these things, because I feel like I'm like throwing absolutely everything I can at healing, and then also preventing a recurrence too. So honestly, taking an integrative approach is amazing physically, but I think it also really helps, for me anyway, it really helped with my mental and my emotional health as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I can't even imagine just being like how helpless you would feel
Mm-hmm.
just going in for your treatment, not really fully
Right.
understanding what it does, and then being at the mercy of, okay, what's the next test gonna
Yeah.
say, and really like watch and wait, right? Like,
Yeah.
to go not feel empowered and feel like
Yeah.
I'm gonna do all these things to be the healthiest that I can be. Like,
Yeah.
any other way just seems so wrong,
I
right?
know. Yeah. Yeah, it really does. And it's such a shame. And you're so right about that feeling of helplessness, that I felt when I was diagnosed. It disappeared over the period of time. And that disappearing started with me doing my research and starting to, yeah, involve myself, becoming like an active patient. I like to say that I became a member of my own healing team. I wasn't just the person that the health professionals were directing the healing at. I was actively engaged as a member of my own healing team as well, and that was so empowering for me. Like you said, yeah, it really got rid of that hopeless feeling.
Yeah, and I think that's
Mhm.
so awesome, right? Like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
just to like, even growing up as a child, like, kids should ask questions. Like, you should say,
Yeah.
why, and
Right.
then all adults, we think like, oh, these, we need to listen to the medical, because it's like you want to still even ask, like, keep asking questions. You always
Yeah.
want to be, then why, right? Like,
Yeah.
what, why? So
Definitely. Yeah.
that's good to lose
Yeah.
that. It's important.
It is. Okay, so I'm gonna do some questions from viewers that have come in. So the first one that I see there is, okay. So this one has to do with genetic cancers, and I know, for me, I was very lucky in that my cancer did not have a genetic component, which was surprising because of my age. But for people who do have a genetic cancer, I can only imagine that it must feel almost inevitable that it will happen, or that it will come back, because it's our genetics. We can't do anything about it. But um, is there something that a naturopath can do to help with the genetic component of cancers?
Yeah, so if you have a genetic predisposition, and that's really all it is, it's almost like you're born with this. It doesn't mean that genetically it's going to happen
Right.
or not, like we're saying with genetics. So you are at 5 times more risk to actually have that cancer, as opposed to if there was a genetic component there. I always recommend going through what's called nutrition genome. And so that's basically a DNA test that you can get, and it'll give you a whole profile of how you can optimize your system based on your own personal genetics. So if you don't detox effectively, it'll tell you that in your genes. It'll see like how your body breaks down hormones, which foods you want to increase, which ones are actually going to cause more inflammation versus the next person. So from a genetic standpoint, I would say that test is really important. But knowing like we have so much power still. So just because it's in 3 histories back and genetic wise, we still can do so much to make sure those genes don't turn on.
Right. Yeah, because it's the epigenetics that we were talking about earlier, because some people who have, say, the BRCA gene will get breast cancer and some won't. And so I think it correct me if I'm wrong, but it comes back to the things we've been talking about this whole time: hormones and diet and stress and toxins. We're exposed to so many of them. Those are the types of things that can turn on those genes, correct?
Exactly. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get cancer.
Right.
But then a lot of people feel like they know they have that genetic
Yeah.
predisposition. They're so stressed out about it. So I think you even more have to be encouraged to take that into your own hand and
Right.
say, I'm not just destined to get cancer.
Yeah.
There's things I can do to actually work with these cards I've been dealt with.
Definitely.
And put
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. So making sure that, like, yeah, your diet is as good as it can be, and you're managing your stress well, and you're doing things like testing your heavy metals and testing your hormones, and doing things to support your metabolism. These are all things that can help prevent those genes from turning on.
Exactly. So genetics, I look at that as like literally one piece of that puzzle, but
Yeah.
then having, yeah, like getting all the testing done, even checking, looking at what your microbiome looks like sending that off and get DNA testing for if you have a latent viral infection or parasites, anything that could be distracting your immune system from focusing on killing cancer cells, you want to clean that up.
Definitely. So interesting. Okay, another one here. Where do you think the future of alternative medicine is headed? People tend to have a misconception about alternative medicine. Where do you see the future of it? Do you see that improving, people's opinions of it improving, and it becoming more mainstream, I guess, or yeah, less taboo?
This is such a question where it's like I wish I could answer
Hmm.
differently. And I hopes of like what I want the future to look like. But I just think pharmaceutical companies, it's like $1 trillion business,
Yep.
right? Like it's a business the day, and I can't see that going out of business. Like pharmaceuticals are very powerful. Um, I know that there's certain therapies that we're doing now that's actually mainstream in Europe. So just because it's alternative here in other parts of the world,
Right.
so like mistletoe,
Yeah.
vitamin C therapy, they're actually using that in hospitals. So just to say like we're alternative, I'm hoping that North America is going to become more integrative. Just to give an example, like when I was in ICU talking to some of the oncologists on the floor there, only 1 out of the 10 oncologists there actually thought nutrition was important.
Wow.
So like in their in the hospitals, they're given like corn syrup, high fructose. It's just like
Mhm.
garbage basically.
Garbage.
And so to think like this is what you're these sick people,
Yep.
and you're hoping that they're going to get better, like this makes no sense. And so
Yeah.
there's one, so like 10% is really thinking, yeah, maybe there's something wrong with the system. But medicine is so like when you think of medicine, you think of drugs, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's, I don't know, I'd love to be optimistic and thinking we can be more
Yeah.
integrative, but we're into our own hands, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Um, so this is interesting. This next question. So, Vandana says it's natural, so it must be safe, right? But that's not necessarily always the case. So, how should we go about finding the right vitamins and supplements for our body? Because what works for somebody else might not work for us. because we maybe have different imbalances or we have different root causes that led to cancer in the first place. So yeah, how can we find the right vitamins and supplements for our body? Because there's so many possibilities.
Exactly. That's where you need to find a good naturopath.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, you really do need, and even for myself, like to be my own doctor, it's tough because you think you want to take everything and you want to just do everything and you
Right.
think, oh, it's natural, like do it. But really having someone to do all the outside testing, to see what those sensitivities are, what the best protocol, and put you on a plan that's keeping you accountable.
Right.
It's really tough to do that all on your own. So you
Yeah.
do a lot of the research, come up with those questions, but then having other people on the outside who know about the interactions and can look at the studies and can personalize that to you. You really need an outside person.
Definitely. And I think too, especially because so many cancer patients, we are on um conventional drugs of one type or another, whether it's chemo or tamoxifen afterwards, or oral chemo or whatever. There's just a lot of stuff that people are potentially on. And so you have to think about like interactions, and even natural substances have some
Yeah.
interactions and stuff like that too. So yeah, I really agree that it can be, and it's so true. And this was my mindset. I'm like, I gotta do everything, I gotta do everything, I gotta do everything. And like, not only can you just like overload your system, but it's also, I think, super stressful too, to try
Yeah.
to do everything. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
it's counterproductive.
Yeah. And there's actually a lot of herbs. Like we think, okay, herbs are natural, but there's so many that can actually interfere with the drugs that you're taking.
Hmm.
And there's actually a lot that make those drugs work more effectively. So
Right.
no ones that don't make you feel worse or that just don't affect the drug
Yeah.
metabolism. And even the specific cancer type itself, like there's a lot of herbs, depending what type of cancer you
Right.
have, may be really supportive versus ones that promote the growth of it,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, professional support. I would agree with that one. That I think that's great advice. Um, Another one here. How can we stop the recurrence of cancer or a second cancer? Because I know, like, just getting a diagnosis is so scary. And people who haven't gone through cancer, and I know I had this mindset too before I had been diagnosed, that it almost feels like once treatment is over, you're all good, you can go back to normal. But really, there's no going back to the way it was before. Cancer, even though you may not physically have it anymore, it's still always going to be a part of your life, because there's this like really lovely voice in the back of your head that's like, it might come back. So how do
Right.
we like, that's just a very real fear. Every time you have like a little ache or a pain or a weird bump, you're automatically, I know for me, my brain is
Mhm.
just like, oh god, maybe it's back. So how can we prevent or help to prevent those recurrences from happening?
Yeah, and even there's a lot of drugs or chemo or cancer treatments that the
Hmm.
side effects is a different type of cancer
Yeah.
coming on afterwards,
Yeah.
right? Um, so really, it goes back to looking at why it came in the first place,
Right.
right? So you really hone in on how your body deals with toxicity and even doing a detox protocol after you have chemotherapy, like get all this garbage out of you, anything that's really turning those cancer either genes on or making you more inflamed. We have to change the whole dynamics. So if you go through cancer treatments and don't change your lifestyle afterwards, yeah, likely something will come back, right?
Right.
Like for people to be aware, like there's a reason why it started in the first place.
Yeah.
And even if you're eating the perfect diet and you do everything properly, if you're mentally so stressed about it all the time, then that's going to throw your system off too,
Hmm.
right? So just taking it a day at a time and not feeling like you have to do everything or you're going to
Right.
be, it's like give your body a break, right? And incorporate just one thing, a new thing every day. Like, okay, let's start just breathing and let's now look at what I can put in my diet instead of having to eliminate everything, like the gut foods. And really just looking at why it started. And you can't, it's hard to know that on your own. Like you
Yeah.
do need tests of what's going on cellularly, right?
Hmm.
Like what's going on in the cells, or else you just don't know. So
Yeah.
to question, I'd say advanced testing, getting all those tests done. I talk a lot about this in my book, which anyone that's listening, if you want a free copy, I want to send it to you. So make sure you give me your email. But I have all of the testing and detox protocols, all of that in there that you'd want to take advantage of. So you can learn about yourself and do everything you can to support your body.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so if anybody who is watching, if you want to pop your email into the comments section, I'll send that list to Dr. Lori and she'll get you a copy of her book. That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and I think also just again, before we move on from this, I think that for me, once again, just taking an integrative approach and not stopping the healing when the cancer is gone, if that makes sense, because sometimes like it takes everything we have just to get through conventional treatment, and once we're finally done that and the cancer is gone and we've accomplished that, it's really easy to just sort of be like, okay, good, done, and then it's easier just to like, not think about it anymore, not think about the reasons why it happened, and not have to do that. But I think that contributes to the fear of it coming back, because we know it must have happened for a reason. But if you don't look at what those reasons are, then yeah, I think yeah,
It's such human nature, right? We have a problem, let's go fix it, and then let's go back because it's not like a headache, right? Like you're gonna, okay, let's get out of that situation, let's get the headache, and then we'll return to keep doing the same things. But we really have to look at a lifestyle change. Like
definitely.
there's no about it. It just has to be a new normal for you, and a new way of feeding your system. Otherwise, you are setting yourself up for things happening again and again.
And I think there is a really big, like this was something that, like, my dad had cancer when I was a kid, so it's not like cancer was something new to me, but I still had this misconception, and I think it's quite a common one, that most cancers are caused because of genetics. Like, oh, it just runs in my family. There's nothing that you can do about it. So I know it was really shocking for me to find out that, yeah, only 5 to 10% of cancers are actually genetic. But people not realizing that there's so many other factors, I think ends up preventing people from even knowing that they should look for those root causes in the first place.
Exactly. And a lot of it is just unaware, right? Like we're just never not told. And even just the way like the food industry is, like you think what you're buying is safe. You think, why would selling these foods that are full of all these things? You wouldn't think that would be happening. But the more you learn, the more it's like, oh geez, it's the odds aren't working in our favor, right? Like there's so much that are carcinogenic that we just don't even know unless we learn about it.
Yeah. So we have one more here, and this is a really broad one and probably difficult to answer. The question was, how can we prevent cancer in the first place at all? But I might modify that a bit and just say because from the discussion, I'm sure everybody has gathered that there are so many things that we can do to prevent cancer. So if someone is just starting out, or they maybe had cancer and took only a conventional approach, and now they're maybe starting to want to incorporate some alternative things to help prevent a recurrence, what would be maybe like their first step? What's maybe the first thing that they should do? And if possible, is it like something that they can do at home, because they might not have a naturopath and they might not have access to that advanced testing that we were talking about, like epigenetics and heavy metals and things like that. So maybe for people who are at home right now and wanting to do something, what's maybe that first step that they could take right now?
Yeah, this is such a broad question.
Yeah.
I was going to say something at home, but even lab work that you can get done through your doctor, there's a couple inflammatory things that you can look at. So like ESR, CRP, blood glucose levels. You can see just on a very basic level how inflamed is your body.
Right.
And you can use those as, okay, wow, I need to make a change. Or you can just go ahead anyways and make these changes because we just know that certain things like sugar, getting rid of processed sugar. We know cancer cells have 2 to 3 times more insulin receptors, so they just love sugar, right? And so the more you can eliminate that, then the less you're fighting, or the more that you're you're not feeding cancer cells. So
Mhm.
to know that we literally, all of us have cancer cells, every single one of us. So to say like preventing cancer, it's what we're doing on a daily basis from preventing it to grow into an actual tumor.
Right.
So getting
Yeah.
rid of one. We talked about intermittent fasting, like literally just putting in 12 hours of no food and just water for overnight, right? Just
Yeah.
12 hours. And putting in maybe like some sort of just like breathing.
Yeah.
50,
Some stress management. Yeah.
yeah, delegate. I know right now is like awful for getting help and delegating during COVID, but
Yeah.
there's an opportunity to get more help to do things so you don't feel like you have to do things all the time, just having that community around you to
Yeah.
support.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much for those suggestions. That was awesome. So that's the time. That's all the time that we have. But I just want to thank you, Dr. Lori, so much for speaking with me and with everybody today and sharing your expertise. It's been so informative, especially I'm sure for people who are new to the alternative world. I think this gave them a really good overview of some of the options and the things that we do. And thank you everybody so much for tuning in. I really hope that you found our discussion hopeful and empowering and interesting. And once again, I want to thank Cancer Warrior Canada Foundation for putting this show on and putting it all together for us. If anyone wants to work with you, Dr. Lori, or find out more about you and your work that you're doing, how can they do that?
So you can go to drlori.ca, so drlori.ca. All the contact information will be there. And like I said, if you do want a free copy of the book, I am more than willing to share that information. So
Awesome.
love to work with you.
Perfect. Okay, and if anybody would like to find out more about my community, Orenda Cancer Community and blog, you can visit our website at orendablog.ca, or you can find us on Facebook. Just search Orenda Cancer Community. I post extensively about my experience with integrative cancer care. So if you heard anything tonight and you're wondering, what was that like? Or should I do that? If you have any questions for me about my experience, please feel free to join the Facebook group or contact me through the website. I'd be happy to answer any questions and share my experience. And also, just for anybody else who's watching and isn't already following Cancer Warrior Canada Foundation, make sure that you're following their Facebook page and YouTube channel so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes, because there'll be lots more. So once again, Dr. Lori, thank you so much. Oh, and if anybody needs any help, Cancer Warrior Canada Foundation is supporting families who are struggling right now because of COVID and cancer. So if you or anybody else you know needs help, you can call the number at the bottom of your screen right now, or you can also follow and contact them through social media. So thank you once again, Dr. Lori. Thank you, everybody who is watching, and we'll have another episode for you soon next week. So keep an eye on Cancer Warrior Canada Foundation Facebook page for that information. Have a good night, everybody.
For having me. Have a good night.
Absolutely.
Bye.